You know that feeling after you've given everything in a conversation and somehow walked away feeling like you lost something? You can't name what. You weren't wronged exactly, but you're tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You replay the exchange and think, I was reasonable, I was kind, so why do I feel like this? That feeling is not a character flaw. It is not oversensitivity. It is a signal. And this video is about what it's telling you. Research shows that agreeable people don't just feel more stress during conflict, they feel it more sharply, and it takes longer to leave their bodies. A 2023 meta-analysis drawing on 298 separate studies found that when people who score high on agreeableness experience betrayal or a broken promise, their cortisol response is sharper, their positive affect collapses more severely, and their recovery takes measurably longer than people who score lower. Your pain after these moments is not disproportionate. It is biological. It is real, and it has been documented. Research on what psychologists call placing inordinate value on relationships over your own needs, people who've learned to put the relationship above everything, including themselves, shows that these individuals are significantly more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, and what researchers call identity erosion, a gradual loss of knowing what you actually want, because every decision has been filtered through other people's comfort first. You didn't become this way by accident, but the pattern has a cost that shows up in your body, your energy, and over time, your sense of self. Here is what makes this harder to see. Your warmth is not the problem. The problem is the absence of any mechanism for response. And in the 1980s, a scientist ran an experiment that proved exactly what that costs and what the winning alternative actually looks like. What if the kindest, most cooperative strategy in any environment is also the most mathematically precise one? In 1980, political scientist Robert Axelrod at the University of Michigan ran a tournament that changed how scientists understand cooperation, trust, and the architecture of human interaction. He invited 14 of the world's best game theorists, mathematicians, and behavioral scientists to submit computer programs. Each strategy would compete against every other across 200 rounds of a game called the prisoner's dilemma. Some strategies were ruthlessly aggressive. Some were purely cooperative. Extend trust always, absorb everything. Some were built with dozens of conditional rules by researchers who had spent years on this problem. The winner was 5 lines of code submitted by mathematician Anatole Rappaport, a man best known not as a strategist, but as a pioneer in the academic field of peace research. Before we get to what won, it helps to understand the game itself. 2 players, separate rooms, no communication. Each has one choice: stay silent and protect the other, or betray the other to reduce their own sentence. If both stay silent, both receive a light outcome. If both betray, both suffer heavily. But if one betrays while the other cooperates, the betrayer goes free, and the cooperator receives the maximum punishment. The mathematics of a single interaction are unambiguous. Regardless of what the other person does, you are individually better off betraying. That is the rational move in isolation. And this is not abstract theory. Your brain runs this calculation constantly, not consciously, but in every social exchange, every time you decide whether to push back or absorb, whether to hold a limit or let it pass, whether to say what you mean or give someone what keeps them comfortable. You are in a version of this game every day. Axelrod understood that real life isn't a single game, it's a repeated game. You encounter the same people again and again. Your reputation travels ahead of you. The question becomes, what strategy, played consistently across hundreds of interactions, produces the best cumulative result over time? Tit for tat won. Twice. Axelrod ran the tournament a second time. Contestants knew the results. They designed strategies specifically to exploit or outlast tit for tat. It won again. Rappaport's strategy had two rules. Rule 1, cooperate on the first move, always. Never initiate conflict. Enter every encounter with trust by default. Rule 2, after that, mirror exactly what the other player did on their last move. They cooperated, you cooperate. They defected, you defect. Immediately. Once. Proportionally. Then return to cooperation as if nothing happened. This isn't about turning you into a strategist. It's about showing you that the thing you've been doing, absorbing without responding, was never going to work. Not because you're weak, because the math says it is impossible. Every strategy willing to exploit a target that signals it will not respond, it did exactly that. The unconditional cooperator didn't finish second, it finished last. Axelrod's analysis identified 4 specific properties that made tit for tat win. Here they are, not as game theory, but as something you can use. Rule 1. Be nice. Don't initiate conflict. Enter every interaction from a position of trust and good faith. This isn't naivety. It positions you as someone safe to cooperate with, which has genuine long-term value. Rule 2. Be provocable. The moment someone crosses a line, you respond. Not with emotion, not with a speech, proportionally, visibly, immediately. If someone disrespects you, you address it in the moment. If someone takes more than you offered, you offer less next time. If someone breaks an agreement, the next agreement has different terms. Clean, accurate, every time. Rule 2 sounds simple. It isn't. For many people, especially people who learned early that keeping others comfortable was how you stayed safe, responding proportionally doesn't feel like strategy, it feels like danger. We'll come back to that, because understanding why Rule 2 is so hard is just as important as knowing it exists. Rule 3, be forgiving. After the response, and this is critical, you return to full cooperation immediately. No grudges, no references to the incident in future exchanges. You treat the next interaction as a fresh round. Over-punishment is just as destructive as no punishment. Strategies that punished too long dragged both players into spirals of mutual defection that destroyed value for everyone. Rule 4. Be clear. Make your rules visible through behavior, not announcements, not speeches, through what you do. Agreeable people almost always fail here because they keep their limits private, suffer internally, and eventually break in a way that seems disproportionate because no one saw the accumulation. Look at what you have likely been doing. You run Rule 1. You extend trust. You enter every interaction with good faith. But Rules 2, 3, and 4, the provocability, the clean forgiveness after response, and the clarity through behavior, those have been missing. You've kept the front of the strategy and discarded the engine. And here is what that looks like from the outside. Someone whose limits don't exist in practice, not because others are bad people, but because the data they have on you supports that conclusion. Every time a line was crossed and you absorbed it, every time you gave more than was sustainable and called it fine, that was information. The only way to change the conclusion is to change the evidence. There is one more piece, and it may be the most important one for how you actually live this. Tit for tat has a structural flaw: noise, misunderstandings, misread signals. You said something that wasn't hostile, but it was interpreted as hostile and met with retaliation. Now you're confused and hurt, so you retaliate back.
Now two people are punishing each other for something that never happened, both convinced the other started it, locked in a spiral that neither wanted, but neither knows how to exit without absorbing a hit that feels completely undeserved. This is not an edge case. This is most of the actual conflict in real relationships, not deliberate betrayal, noise. Researchers testing tit for tat in realistic conditions found that even small amounts of noise, the normal static of human communication, significantly degraded its performance. The solution that emerged was called generous tit for tat. Same four rules, one modification. Occasionally, not as a default, not from fear, but as a deliberate choice, forgive a defection you have the full right to punish. This is the distinction between a system and a person. A system applies the rule 100% of the time. A person has judgment.
They can read that the colleague who snapped is under pressure that has nothing to do with them. They can assess that the broken agreement was genuinely unintentional and not the start of a pattern. They can choose to extend grace, not because they have to, but because they've looked at the situation and decided it warrants it. Imagine a close friend who cancels plans at the last minute. Under strict tit for tat, you cancel on them next time. But you know they've been going through something. You've seen it. So you make a deliberate choice. I'm going to let this one pass. Not because I always do, because this specific situation with this specific person earns it. That choice comes from strength. It comes from knowing you could respond and choosing not to. That is entirely different from absorbing because you don't believe you're allowed to do anything else. That is strategy operating at a human level. Calibrated, not cold, not soft. Calibrated. Now we need to talk about why so many people never reach this point. Because the barrier isn't intellectual. It isn't a lack of information. Something happened before the math that made unconditional cooperation feel like the only safe option available. You were not born a people pleaser. It is learned. A 2025 peer-reviewed study published in Psych.Journal analyzing over 500 participants confirmed what clinical psychologists have documented for decades. Higher levels of people-pleasing are directly associated with lower mental well-being, greater vulnerability to depression, and measurable erosion of knowing what you actually want, because every choice has been run through other people's comfort before your own. But the mechanism underneath people-pleasing is not generosity. Psychologist Pete Walker identified what trauma researchers call the fawn response, the fourth survival reaction beyond fight, flight, and freeze. Fawn activates when someone learns, usually early and in a context where they had no power, that making people comfortable is the mechanism for staying safe. Here is what matters most about that. The fawn response was not a mistake. In the context where it developed, it was often the most sophisticated move available to you. It was intelligent. It was adaptive. It worked. The problem isn't that you learned it. The problem is that survival responses don't update themselves automatically when the environment changes. They keep learning the same program in new situations where the original threat is no longer present. You have to do that work consciously, and that is not a small thing to ask, but it is possible. When the threat is emotional or social, fawn doesn't look like survival. It looks like warmth. It looks like flexibility. It looks like being easy to be around. But underneath, it is an old program running in situations where it no longer applies, and every time you activate it, you reinforce it. Think about the people in your life you find hardest to say no to. Think about the interactions that leave you hollow, where you gave something you didn't want to give and told yourself it was fine. Ask honestly, was that generosity, or was it an old fear doing what it was trained to do when it detected the possibility of disapproval?
Because a person running the fawn response cannot easily implement Rule 2. Every appropriate response, every enforced limit, every moment of healthy provocability triggers the exact threat the fawn program was built to avoid. It doesn't feel strategic, it feels dangerous, even when it isn't. That is the wall. Not ignorance of the strategy, not lack of will, an old program written for a situation that no longer exists, still running in the background of every interaction where someone pushes to see what you'll allow. Recognizing the fawn response doesn't fix it overnight, but it changes everything about how you relate to it. You stop experiencing your people-pleasing as who you are. You start experiencing it as something that happens in you, something you can notice and eventually interrupt. That is where the recalibration begins. Here is the synthesis, and I want to be precise about what this asks of you and what it doesn't. You are not being asked to stop trusting people. Tit for tat cooperates first, always. You extend good faith by default. That stays. You are not being asked to become someone who holds grievances. The strategy responds once, proportionally, then returns to full cooperation. Long-term resentment is not strategy. It is weight that costs only you. What you are being asked to do is add the half of the system you've been leaving out. Start with one decision. Define what a crossed line looks like for you. Not for anyone else, for you. What does a defection look like in your closest friendships, in your relationship, in your family, in your work? These environments have different histories and different noise levels. Your rules can be calibrated to each. Then signal those rules through behavior, not announcements, not speeches. The first time a line is crossed, respond visibly, calmly, once. People don't update their behavior based on your internal state. They update based on what you do. They don't know where your limits are unless your actions show them. Then practice the forgiveness half with the same discipline. After the response, after Rule 2, you let it go completely. You don't reference the incident in the next conflict. You treat the next interaction as a new round. That discipline, responding and then releasing without holding, is what separates strategy from anger and what makes cooperation durable over time. Dr. Christine Carter draws a distinction that matters here. Pleasing others is not the same as helping others. Helping means serving their genuine need. Pleasing means managing your own anxiety by giving them what they want. The person who learns that difference, who cooperates from choice rather than fear, who responds from clarity rather than anger, who forgives from strength rather than exhaustion, that person is running the winning strategy. Not because they've become harder, because they've become honest. The world does not punish nice people. It punishes predictably exploitable people. Those are entirely different things. If you've made it this far, something in you already knows this is true. You've felt the difference between the times you responded and the times you absorbed. You know what it costs to keep saying yes when you mean no, to keep forgiving before anything has changed, to keep signaling reliably and consistently that your limits are optional. The question was never whether to be nice. The question was always which version of nice you're running. Unconditional cooperation, no response mechanism, no visible rules, no recovery after defection is not kindness. It is the most exploitable position in any environment where not everyone operates by the same rules as you do. But the version of nice that starts with trust, responds to betrayal proportionally, forgives completely after response, and makes its rules visible through behavior, that strategy wins. Not by dominating, not by being ruthless, by being the most reliable source of genuine cooperation in every system it enters. The game was never be nice or be hard. The game was always be honest about what cooperation costs and clear about what it requires. That's not coldness, that's respect, for yourself first, and through that, for everyone around you. If this resonated with you, take a moment before you move on. You don't have to perform recovery in a comment section. Just notice what landed. That noticing is where it begins.